Greg Abbott is at it again. And again, I ask rhetorically, who hurt you? Why so nasty? Why are you doing this? The Texas governor pardons a man in a fatal shooting of a BLM protester. That's what he has time for with everything else going on. Per Mother Jones on Thursday, purportedly on the advice of the Texas Board of Pardons and Paroles, Texas Governor Greg Abbott on the left formally pardoned Daniel Perry Center for his 2020 murder of the 28-year-old Garrett Foster on the right with his fiancee, Whitney Mitchell. Happened at a Black Lives Matter protest in Austin. I want to remind you of this tragedy. Here's coverage of the shooting committed by Daniel Perry.
His name was Garrett Foster, and he went to the demonstration with his wheelchair-bound fiancée. Foster was legally carrying an AK-47 style rifle, something he was actually interviewed about on social media. Take a little listen.
They don't let us march in the streets anymore, so got to practice some of our rights.
This was not the only time he did this, okay? He was kind of known within that protest movement for coming this way. Now, here's the salient part. At some point, a car got involved with the protesters. Some say it was just driving through an intersection. Others say it burst onto the scene. Either way, Foster was in a crowd of protesters that surrounded the car. Then this happened.
Everybody back up!
Didn't need to happen. And a jury agreed it didn't need to happen.
With millions watching and many people benefiting from this program called Indisputable, we just need 1% of the viewers to become a paid member so we can continue to bring this content to you. Now back to the show.
So Mother Jones says that Greg Abbott purportedly acted on the advice of the Texas Board of Pardons because Abbott never waited for that board before passing judgment in the case. See, people just say anything, but the facts don't add up. For the New York Times, under Texas law, a recommendation from the board is necessary before the governor can grant a pardon. He announced a little over a year ago he was working as swiftly as the law allows. That's the quote, to get Perry out of prison. Texas is one of the strongest stand your ground laws of self-defense that cannot be nullified by a jury or a progressive district attorney, Abbott explained on X at the time. He used that same line verbatim in his statement declaring Perry a free man. This is the twisted nature of what law and order means in Texas. It is soft on crime to convict someone of murder now. Mother Jones. Perry was an active duty U.S. Army sergeant on the night of July 25th, 2020, working as an Uber driver. Perry was driving his vehicle near the state capitol when he encountered the BLM protesters that night in Austin. He drove into a crowd of demonstrators after honking at them first. Okay, so he drove towards them. Get out of the way. That's what the honk means, right? Most of us would say, okay, I'm gonna take a detour. I don't want to get involved in this traffic nightmare, whatever. You don't have to be part of the cause. He then shot Foster 5 times through his car window. Perry claimed self-defense as his justification for killing Foster, who was also legally armed. And his attorneys argued that Foster had pointed a rifle at him. Witnesses stated that Foster had not raised his gun. Okay, so you're in the vehicle. You could have turned around, gone the other way, even in Texas. But you chose to shoot 5 times out of your window. Self-defense. Nope. Prosecution produced disturbing messages from Perry in which he talked repeatedly about shooting and killing protesters. Quote, I might go to Dallas to shoot looters, he wrote in one text. In another message, per the Texas Tribune, he mentioned seeing blacks gathering up in a group and wrote that, I wonder if they will let me cut the ears off of people who's decided to commit suicide by me. Told a friend that I might have to kill a few people on my way to work. They are rioting outside my apartment complex. Well, that takes care of character, intent. Now we know who we're dealing with, right? Self-defense. Looks like you were looking for it. Perry was convicted by a jury of murder, but acquitted of a second charge, aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, sentenced to 25 years in prison in a hearing last year. Prosecutors presented the trove of racist online comments and said that psychological experts had found him to be basically a loaded gun. As the Pardons Board considered the case, lawyers with the Travis County District Attorney met with the board to argue against a pardon. I thought pardons were, difficult. There's a certain threshold, hurdles that you have to get over. I want to make sure you're deserving of this. But hey, in Texas, maybe not. Maybe not. Jackson, what have you heard thus far?
Well, I mean, pardoning this guy really doesn't serve much of a logical purpose other than a political decision. And, this is in line with the right wing's obsession with guns. Because you just pointed out all these text messages where he obviously showed some intention to where he wanted to be violent at some point. He wanted to take out vengeance, especially against these protesters. It was on his mind. And shooting out your window 5 times, that's a lot of times to shoot. But then again, there's also the issue on the other side is even if this guy didn't point his AK-47, he still had it. So why do we need people with guns all over the place to begin with? You know what I'm saying? No matter how you look at this story, it's oh, everyone has guns, which is the problem. You know what I'm saying? Obviously we have the right to have weapons. It makes total sense to defend yourself, especially if it's your home, if you're out and about. But, there's a bunch of protesters. I can't wait itch to shoot, similar to Kyle Rittenhouse, however you feel about it. But again, why did this guy need to be pardoned? Other than just principle for principle's sake. We love guns in this country. Everybody got guns, and this is Texas. So again, the guy who got shot, he had a gun too. Everybody got guns. And somehow that's not the issue. So it's really ridiculous.
Yeah, it is. And I think it's a way to tell Black people, brown people, supporters of a Black Lives Matter movement that you don't matter. And you're not in charge. And Greg Abbott is making a political statement and lying along the way. And it looks like the Texas Board of Pardons is really just a rubber stamp for what this governor or the next or the previous decides he wants to do. He already chose barbed wire, right? Put that so that migrants trying to get to a better life would find it difficult or even die. And he's wanted to do much more. And some have died, right? Some have died. So here's where we're at. Per the New York Times, under Texas law, a recommendation from the board is necessary before the governor can grant a pardon. He announced a little over a year ago he was working as swiftly as the law allows to get Perry out of prison. Because like I said, there's not anything else to do. This has to move up. This is urgent, okay? This is almost like, when a governor says this is a federal disaster. He goes to the presidency, goes to the feds and says, I got to get someone in here now. It's an emergency. That's what it seems like. Texas is one of the strongest stand your ground laws of self-defense that cannot be nullified by a jury or a progressive district attorney. Abbott explained on X at the time. He used the same line verbatim in his statement declaring Perry a free man. This is the twisted nature of what law and order means in Texas. It is soft on crime to convict someone of murder now. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, just
punctuated.
A waste of a pardon. It just really is a waste.
Well, and here's what happens next. Per NBC News, the governor's pardon will restore Perry's right as if he were never convicted, including the right to own firearms, because he's been so responsible with them. Yeah, I added that. The family of Foster, a former U.S. Air Force mechanic, expressed disbelief at Perry's pardon, attributing it to political motives. Republicans and pundits, including Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton and Tucker Carlson, had called for the pardon. Oh, well, you're on the side of something when Tucker starts calling for it. Yes. Fruit flies. Feels like a Twilight Zone episode, Foster's mother, Sheila, said. This seems like a political circus, and it's costing me my life. She noted that her son, a Second Amendment supporter who attended the racial justice protest in 2020, quote, deserves so much better. Sheila added he was an Air Force veteran protecting people from people like Perry. He should be here. After being charged, Perry became a right-wing cause celeb. Abbott made his initial promise to look into a pardon almost immediately after then Fox News host Tucker Carlson ran a segment criticizing him for inaction in April of 2023. Members of Perry's defense team did make hay of the fact that one member of the jury had apparently improperly consulted information that was not introduced in court. I'm sure what was introduced, though, backed it up. Not supposed to do that, though. Conservatives were attracted to the trial for bigger reasons, like Kyle Rittenhouse. Perry was exalted as a persecuted martyr, standing up to progressive anarcho-tyranny. In his own statement to the pardon, Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton placed the shooting in the context of the BLM riots that terrorized the nation in 2020, rewriting history. The Confederate daughters would be proud of that statement, rewriting history, riots. Now, it's worth reckoning with the ramifications of the self-defense argument here. The right to bear arms is so inviolable that you can carry a gun almost anywhere. But also, if you see someone carrying a gun at a protest, you can shoot them justifiably. It's hard to have a First Amendment when the Second Amendment looks like that. Doesn't make for much of a Second Amendment either. This is not just about Daniel Perry. Abbott's pardon and its accompanying rhetoric fits into a pattern of sanctioned violence or threatened violence against undesirables. In this case, it was an Air Force veteran protesting police brutality. There's not even a cursory mention in Abbott's statement of Foster, the victim. In January, it was migrants. The only thing that we are not doing is we're not shooting people who come across the border, Abbott told former NRA spokesperson Dana Loesch. Because, of course, the Biden administration would charge us with murder. Because it is, isn't it, Governor Abbott? Shooting people on sight, no trial, no justification. I think that's murder. A charge should be had, a trial should be had. And it shouldn't happen at all. Question of how to deal with people, and particularly people who are inside cars who inflict harm on protesters, is very much a live issue. Drivers deliberately hitting groups of people with their vehicles is an extremely common thing in the United States. Boston Globe analysis found that between Floyd's death, May 25th, 2020, and September 30th, 2021, vehicles drove into protests at least 139 times. There were charges in only 65 of those incidents. At least 16 states have recently considered laws to grant immunity to drivers in such circumstances. I mean, they've got a lot to do. Remember, they've got a lot of things to prioritize. And giving drivers who run over protesters immunity seems like that's at the top of the list. It's urgent, depending on where you live and who your governor is. Legislature. Last month, after critics of Israel's bombing campaign in Gaza shut down streets in New York City, Senator Tom Cotton, a Republican out of Arkansas, who found favor with slavery, implored drivers to take matters into your own hands to get them out of the way. In another text message ahead of an earlier trip to Dallas, Perry wrote to a friend, "No protesters go near me or my car." The message from Abbott and people like him is ominous. Daniel Perry was not the first. Do you really think he'll be the last? Again, Mother Jones chronicling this, it's filth. You don't matter. If you're black, brown, or you support black, brown, justice, equal protection, you don't matter. Not while Greg Abbott is the governor of Texas. And they are unafraid. I want your impression of all of this, Jackson, but I also want to say this. There have been time and time again, and I'm not trying to rope the president, the administration into this, where Greg Abbott has basically dared him to do something to him. He's acted like Texas is its own country, if you will. And I think he's got to be dealt with finally. I don't know about here, so I'll let you weigh in on the circumstances of this pardon for a man who espoused bigotry and racism, went through with it, and now he's free.
I mean, to me, Greg Abbott kind of just seems to be a political activist. Very similar to somebody like Ron DeSantis or even a Marjorie Taylor Greene. Now, he isn't crazy, he isn't like Looney Tunes like Marjorie Taylor Greene is or anything like that. But it's
Maybe he's just
like
quiet about it.
well, he's good at grabbing headlines, and Republicans like this type of stuff. Like whether if it's this or if he's busing migrants, you know what I mean, or anything along those lines. Like this is really good news for people who are in line with that type of stuff for the right wing in this country. This is really good news for Republicans. They love to see it. So, we're saying this, but on the flip side, they're praising it and they're rejoicing about it because, again, it's just political activism. What was the reversal of Roe v. Wade? Political activism. And it's something that was in place for 50 years. You just had to take it back. You're doing it because you want to. Polls showing that nobody, even Republicans, don't nobody want these 6-week abortion bans, but they passing them anyway. That's just activism. Authoritarianism, too, at the end of the day. It's not democratic. They know that this isn't what people want overall. But that's where we're at right now. So I think that Greg Abbott, on the one hand, he has a lot of issues, but on the other hand, I think he's doing his job when it comes to what Republicans want to see.
Yeah, I think you're right. Some of them want to see this. Too many of them do. And I'm tempted sometimes to not even talk about Greg Abbott or DeSantis or any other, I'll put it in quotes, leader who is doing this kind of bidding. Because at the end of the day, isn't it up to us? Isn't it up to people to say, you don't stand up for me, so you're out of here? If we don't do it soon, because they've peeled away the right for us to vote for our leaders little by little, they're almost there. If we don't do it soon, it could be a wrap.